You will never forget the story of this deadly grizzly attack. Welcome to Top Scares with Mr. Biggs. Make sure you watch until the end for a hint about the next story. This story takes place in northern Montana near Priest Lake, an area that is very remote where true die-hard hunters test their wits against the land and Mother Nature every fall to hunt for deer, elk, bear, and moose. The Priest Lake area is noted for producing large trophies of all species. The forest here is very dense, and in the past many hunters have perished due to exposure after getting lost. Remote Montana is no joke, and not for inexperienced hunters. This story starts with 5 lifelong friends. These hunters were in their prime. They had hunted this area for years and knew how to do it safely. Priest Lake is in an area with a healthy population of bear and wolves, requiring extra steps to prevent or at least limit the potential of an encounter with these apex predators. The first day, the friends spent 3 hours riding horses into camp. The hunters spent the rest of the day setting up camp and making sure a bear fence and the food were in safe locations. In the past, the hunters had twice encountered bears in camp. Both incidents ended with the hunters making a ruckus and firing shots into the air to scare the bears off. The second day, which was the day before hunting season, was spent scouting the area from horseback. The hunters were not disappointed. They seen an abundance of wildlife. Each hunter had picked their areas to hunt the next day. Back at camp, each man immersed himself into the tranquility and quiet and starlight sky that seemed to envelop their camp. At dawn, main season opened. All the hunters made their way to their spots they had picked out the day before. It was just after sunup when the first shot rang out. The hunter made an excellent shot, and a large elk was down. The man traveled to where the elk lay with his horse and started breaking it down. He loaded the elk on the horse and in his backpack. While loading, the hunter noticed what looked like claw marks on the back of his elk, but didn't pay much attention. He was excited by the fact that his family would have food for the next year. Hey everybody, hope you're enjoying the story. Please take a second to like and subscribe. It's going to help me bring you a lot better stories in the future. With the elk loaded, the hunter headed back to camp to hang the meat in the designated area. Set up 2 days earlier, the food catch was about 300 yards away from camp. After getting the elk hung, the hunter went to camp to eat and take a well-deserved nap while waiting on the others to return. Just before the end of the day, another shot rang out. Another majestic bull was down. The hunter decided to leave the elk overnight. Leaving a carcass overnight is common when the nights are cold enough to do so. That night, the hunters ate and regaled each other with tales of the hunt. The first hunter mentioned the claw marks on his elk. The second bull also had wounds that seemed to be from a bear. This was very unusual. The hunters were surprised by this, but just chalked it up as a coincidence. The next 2 days were uneventful. The second bull was brought to camp and hung with the first. The 2 successful hunters stayed at camp and relaxed while waiting to hear shots and a radio call from the others to bring the pack horses. It was roughly 2 p.m. on day 4 when the hunters at camp went to cut some elk steaks for dinner. While doing so, they heard rustling in the trees nearby. They began to yell to scare off whatever was making the noise. It didn't work, and the rustling began to get closer and louder. The 2 hunters had foolishly left their guns at camp, so all they had was a knife. They continued to make noise and slowly backed away from the area where the elk were hanging. The chatter between them consisted of a plan to get to their guns and return to protect their harvest. While backing away, they could hear the jaw snapping and woofing sounds of a bear. A grizzly came into view. The bear walked up to the elk and sniffed the meat. Then it turned in the hunter's direction and gave a false charge that terrified the hunters. The bear violently pawed the ground and kept stalking closer. The hunters continued backing up towards camp. The bear gave more horrific charges, each time closing the distance to the hunters. They were only 50 yards from camp when the bear committed to a full-on attack. The first hunter the bear attacked had the knife that was used to cut the elk steaks. The attack was so violent that all the hunter could do was curl up and hope to survive. As the bear was ripping and biting the hunter on the ground, the second hunter kicked the bear as hard as he could and tried to stab it in the eye with a stick. This stopped the gruesome attack for a moment. The hunter used this opportunity and ran to camp to retrieve his rifle. He returned to find the bear on top of his friend, ripping flesh from his body. The hunter shouldered his .300 and fired until he had no more bullets. The first 3 shots hit the bear, and it ran off, allowing the hunter to reload and check for a pulse on his friend. In a flash of fury and rage, the bear returned. The hunter shot the bear 3 more times, the last shot finding the brain, ending the attack. The hunter dropped to his knees in an adrenaline-fueled exhaustion. He went to the seemingly lifeless body of his friend. The injured hunter was still alive. The others had heard the shots and returned to camp to see what was going on. There shouldn't have been gunfire at camp. The uninjured hunter went to camp to retrieve a satellite phone and called for help. He provided the exact coordinates to an open meadow for a helicopter to land. The rescue team and the helicopter arrived within an hour, but it was too late. The hunting party knelt down by their friend, who was literally ripped to shreds. They helped the rescue team load their mangled friend into the helicopter and watched with broken hearts as the helicopter lifted off. The hunters started to pack up camp. The hunter who killed the bear put his tag on the bear's ear and began to process it. The team loaded everything and returned to their homes. The hunter who killed the bear had a life-size mount done in memory of his friend who would always be present in his thoughts. The hunters gathered in the same area to hunt every year. They have created a memorial at the site of the horrifying attack. This story is terrifying to me, as I am a hunter and have had several encounters with bears myself. What do you think? Was there anything they could have done differently? Why did the bear attack when it had meat right there? My thought is that it was defending the hanging elk and attacked as an instinct to drive competition away from his soon-to-be lunch. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are. Thank you for staying until the end. Before I give you a hint as to the next story, please take a second and like and subscribe to the channel. Now, as promised, the next story will terrify you and keep you on edge when you are out in the woods. This cryptid is bigger and more dangerous than any bear.